So for today's panel, we have three great speakers with a lot to say. We are here today with Philipp Hartmannsgruber. I'm sorry about pronouncing that wrong, most likely. We're here with with Daniel Mangabeira, and we're also with Nick Spanos. I'm going to ask you guys, please, to tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing, and then we can start with a couple of questions.
Oh, wow, it works. I come from the freedom movement. I worked for Dr. Ron Paul, U.S. Congressman, ran for president a few times, and I got involved with crypto very early on. I opened the first live cryptocurrency exchange with Alejandro over here, Palanzas, and 100 feet from the New York stock market back in 2013. It was a pretty ballsy move. We felt like Davids with a little slingshot against the modern day Goliaths. And I've been involved all these years, and I've been going around to different countries and trying to spread the goodness of cryptocurrency, knowing all the time that the CBDs are coming to get us, and we have to be ready. That's who I am.
Thank you very much.
Today.
There's history in the making from the very beginning. Philipp?
Yeah, I'm Philipp Hartmannsgruber. I'm from Germany. We just founded 4 weeks ago the German Bitcoin Association. So we do lobbying for Bitcoin companies in Germany and Europe, especially in the European Union. Just today, we published a statement on the paper from the European Central Bank, which was published like 2 weeks ago against Bitcoin. I think we will talk about this later on. The approach of central banks against Bitcoin and stablecoins like USDC. And I have a consultancy. I tried to build a Bitcoin educational platform, and for especially the last 4 years, I worked for the biggest banks in Germany and were responsible for cryptocurrencies, for cryptocurrency trading, for example. And for the biggest bank in Germany, I worked in the project of the European Central Bank on the retail CBDC, the digital euro. And as you may know, not just we, but banks are against a central bank digital currency too. More about this later on too. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. First time here in South America.
So hi, good afternoon to everyone. Very happy to be here. It's not my first LabitConf, but it's certainly the best organized. I'm really amazed of how this has been put up. One of the best events across Latin America for sure. My name is Daniel Mangabeira. I am today the Vice President of Strategy and Policy for Circle, which is a US-based company. You guys might know Circle by the one that actually is responsible for minting USDC, but Circle is way more than that. We provide infrastructure for the blockchain / crypto industry. And we want to actually expand and be more present in Latin America the best that we can. Argentina for us is a very important country, it's a very important market, not only because of the exposure of Argentinians to stablecoins and crypto as a whole, but also because of how the crypto landscape is taking shape from a regulatory standpoint. I think that connects a bit with the theme that we're going to discuss here today. So,
thank you very much, guys. For today's structured panel, we've got about 1 to 2 questions per speaker. There's a lot to say, and a couple of general ones up to debate. I would love to start with you, Philipp, and my particular question is, you're reading extensively on stablecoins and also the digital euro. How or can central banks create CBDCs that effectively balance security, privacy, and usability, but without stifling? You don't get to... No? I'll start over, sorry. How or can central banks create CBDCs that effectively balance security, privacy, and usability without stifling innovations like stablecoins? So the question starts as a how, or actually can they?
With a central bank digital currency, if they can do this with the central bank digital currency like the digital euro, so like the retail CBDC, the answer is no. So they could do this in principle, especially in the beginning. They could say, for example, we have an offline CBDC which has kind of the same or similar privacy standards like cash, but in the future, if there is another regime, they could change that very easily. If you have one time a technical setup of a central bank digital currency, which may be in the beginning kind of good with privacy, there will not be cash-like privacy with a central bank digital currency. But let's say they do it in the beginning with kind of good privacy. The possibility that it will change in the future is way too high. So I think CBDC and security regarding privacy is not really compliant, and therefore the risks are much higher than the possible use cases. And personally, I don't see any use case of a central bank digital currency.
That is a question that can be related, or an answer that can be related to a question to Mr. Spanos, which is understanding Philipp's perspective and in combination with your perspective, what advice would you therefore, or opinion would you give for central banks to actually try to incorporate blockchain into their financial systems and or CBDCs? What would you recommend, or bear this in mind? So yes.
Me?
Or both. You guys can also tell me.
Well, the central bank digital currency is the wolf that's going to be left into the hen house. The reality is, it's not a privacy issue. You're going to be trained like a dolphin or like a dog. If you don't do the right thing, you won't be able to spend your money. So you have to look at it very carefully. They don't want you to... they cut me off. So if they don't like what you're doing, they're not going to let you spend your money. If they don't like what you're doing, they're not going to let you spend the money. If there's a social score coupled with the CBDC is going to say, hey, you jaywalked, you can't spend your money, you spoke to Nick Spanos, you have to go through re-education AI for 48 hours before you can eat. So if you think this is only a privacy issue, you don't understand what CBDC is. The money in your phone, the money that's going to be controlled by smart contracts that aren't going to be public on a blockchain that's not really going to be it's not going to be decentralized or anything. These are all just catchphrases that they're using to be able to pull you in. But the reality is, once a retail CBDC hits the marketplace, that population is going to be trained like dolphins. You do a flip and then you can use your money. When it's election time, they're going to say, hey, if you don't spend your money, if you don't spend 10% of your money in the next week, it's going to disappear. So they're going to artificially inflate the economy so they can get reelected. Anything a politician wants out of you, they're going to be able to control programmatically. They're not going to have to watch it. The program is going to make you do things. Like you came to this conference, all your money's shut down because you came to Bitcoin conference. The only thing we have is Bitcoin and probably the privacy coins to be able to fight the CBDCs. As a matter of fact, even President Donald Trump doesn't want CBDCs. The governor of Florida said he doesn't want CBDCs. Senator from Texas doesn't want CBDCs. All the people that are left-leaning want to control you. They love CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. So the reality is money has to be of the people, by the people, for the people, like Bitcoin. It should never be of the politicians for the special interests and for whatever. You know, it's all up to us. We have this little opportunity here to be able to change the world in a positive fashion. They're stealing all our technology to control us. And I think everyone has to wake up and smell the coffee, because they might not let you drink coffee. Coffee's bad for you, so you can't send your money to the coffee guy. Do you understand me? Does anyone understand? Give me a round of applause if you understand. All right, thank you.
I believe that therefore there is a combination on the initial answer of can we find this balance between security and privacy and usability and no?
There's no balance. You're letting the wolf into the hen house. There's no balance. They can have a wholesale CBDC, bank to bank or whatever, but it should never touch the individual citizen. Should never have they should have never anything to do with the currency. You see what they're doing with the currency now. Imagine if they could control every movement programmatically of what you do every day at all times. I'm sorry, I'm so passionate.
It's great to be passionate. It's good. And it's good to have perspective from a European side, a US American side, and the Latin American side. And I think that with that, we can also bring Daniel into the conversation, and specifically as with your deep experience in regulatory affairs across Latin America and also working in Circle, what do you see as the primary challenges that central banks in Latin America are going through when it comes to adopting CBDCs, or the approach that central banks are having towards that?
So let me start by saying that this is a tough segue. You know, to follow on the footsteps of Nick's passion is hard. I can't be that passionate. Sorry. I think that when it comes to central banks, I mean, I can't speak for what challenge they're gonna see or they're gonna have ahead of them, but we do see some specific elements that allow us to elaborate. And I think that to me, of course, there is, you know, the most obvious one. We could be talking about security, we could be talking about scale, right? But there is one, especially when we talk about Latin America, that I think is very, very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds, which is the element of the capacity of central banks to enforce their commands on banks, right? And I'm saying this, I'm a Brazilian, I'm based out of Brazil. I'm working very closely with the industry in Brazil, including the central bank, not restricted to them. But I think that in Brazil, regulation allows the central bank to play a much more intense role when it comes to enforcing their will and their projects on banks. Meaning that, you know, just taking a few steps back, before we have, Brazil is creating a project of CBDC, but before that, you know, a couple of years back, it created this instant payments service, the PIX. And PIX is a huge success in Brazil today. We have 210 million people in Brazil, 175 million people in Brazil already uses PIX as a tool for their daily activities. And the reason why this was so successful is because the central bank pushed that onto banks, right? I don't think that's going to be the case with other central banks across Latin America if they want to actually pursue the same route, whether with instant payments or open finance or even CBDC. So I think that enforceability as a key and crucial element to scale and to efficiency is going to be a tricky one. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see how they can bypass this challenge.
In that perspective, and what is going so far in Brazil when it comes to PIX, or what you're mentioning on the potential approval or implementation of DREX, is there such a challenge or fear like the one mentioned by, for example, Nick, when it comes to privacy and when it comes to the enforceability from the government to the private user? Or is Brazil so far, or the regulator, central bank in Brazil, doing it in a way that can preserve more individual rights?
So I think that privacy, I mean, you mentioned this one, and I think that the project, the reason why the project, and we're still talking about Brazil specifically, the reason why the project hasn't moved forward with more speed is because of privacy, right? So this is one of the elements they are, you know, they're struggling to try and understand how they will do things in terms of, you know, they're going to be operating in a universe with a permission blockchain, but we understand the qualities and the characteristics of blockchain. But privacy as an element onto that equation is going to be hard for them to cope with. So again, we anticipate many challenges, not only in terms of technology, understanding, mass adoption, many of those things, but privacy is certainly one of them.
From that point of view, and now going back to you, Philipp, in your opinion, what are the biggest misconceptions that central banks or regulators have about decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and how can the crypto industry help address these?
The problem is, at least what the central bankers are saying against cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, is what I earlier said, is they wrote a paper, 29 pages, against Bitcoin 2 weeks ago to employees from the European Central Bank. And it's still the misconceptions from the early years that Bitcoin is only be used by criminals, Bitcoin mining, proof of work, uses too much energy, so it destroys the planet. They still have all of those misconceptions. Either they don't know it, or they know it, but they want to push their central bank digital currency. And on their way to implement a digital currency, a central bank digital currency, they try to destroy every other currency, which will not happen, at least not for Bitcoin. And I think, especially regarding energy, the last 2 years, all of the studies showed that is totally wrong, what was published earlier on. Mining goes like in the way that it speeds up the way to renewable energies, so it has a lot of good impact. The energy consumption of Bitcoin is not that high, especially not as high as the World Economic Forum claimed in 2017. It would be in 2020. And the rate of transactions with Bitcoin used by criminals is 0.35%. So it's much, much lower than cash, for example. So that's not a problem either. So all of the facts they are stating against cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are not true. How do we change this? Yeah, that's a job all of the associations have to do in a way to talk with them. The thing is, I think it's easier to talk to politicians than with a central bank like the ECB, because there is a check and balances between a central bank and politicians, because only we as people are voting for politicians, but not for central bankers. So we have influence on our politicians with our vote that they will do a good regulation and like to keep central banks in check. For example, in Europe, there could be a chance that the retail CBDC, the digital euro, will not be reality, because I don't hear a lot of politicians saying this is a great thing and we need this. And in the US, it's the same. I don't hear from politicians, wow, we definitely need a central bank digital currency, like US dollar on a ledger. Trump is against it, you said it. Harris probably too, I don't know. So I think we have to talk to them, we have to educate not just the people, but politicians too. And then hopefully with doing a good job, we can educate them good enough that they will do good decisions.
The point of creating dialogue not only with politicians, but also with regulators and decision makers, I think is something that the three of us, we can agree that's a necessity for a proper regulation in the future. And with that question and understanding that there are different stakeholders that are playing this game, we have got financial institutions, we got central bank, we have people in government, people in Congress. I would love to share this question and see who of you guys would like to answer it, which is, how do you see the relationships between traditional financial institutions and decentralized financial platforms evolving in the coming years, especially with central banks increasing regulatory efforts?
Well, they're our enemy. They're not going to tell you that. They want you to buy their instruments that are not self-custody Bitcoin, and they want to call it Bitcoin because they know that some people have understood what Bitcoin is and they're adopting it faster and faster and faster. The best way to trade Bitcoin is peer-to-peer. My friend has an exchange called noones.com where it's peer-to-peer in the global south, and I think that's the best way to trade Bitcoin. When regulators came up with UCC, Universal Commercial Code, is how the states deal with each other. United States, the 50 states deal with each other. The Universal Law Committee made this bill, made this rubber stampable update that said no person, only a financial institution can have a private key. That was in the height of COVID. And a friend of mine called me and said, hey, they're trying to push this UCC that only financial institutions can have. That was Elizabeth Warren and her crew up in Boston, has the right to have a private key. I said, wait, that's math. What are you talking about? And I saw it, and then I paid over a dozen filthy, sleazy lobbyists in the different states to fight it, and we had these meetings, and I said, well, you know, cows might be traded on on an exchange, and their private key will be the ownership. And in Texas, I said, well, then the banks would have to own your cows. And that made them understand, and they fought against it, and they pulled it out of the Universal Commercial Code update. So if people are trying to convince you that the government is your buddy and you need these great regulations and all this stuff, Bitcoin is regulated by math. Bitcoin is regulated by God's laws, math. And we, as Bitcoiners, have to perpetuate and change the world even more, and not allow the wolf into the hen house and use our catchphrases and say, oh, look, Goldman Sachs, we're vindicated now. Goldman Sachs is trading Bitcoin. Oh, we're vindicated. BlackRock is trading Bitcoin. No, we've always been vindicated. Even from back in 2011, we're trading it in the park. We were vindicated, and I knew we were vindicated. And I had incredible businesses, and I just threw all my businesses away, and I followed Bitcoin, and I pushed Bitcoin for the one reason, for independence of the individual. And now the CBDCs are here to destroy that in your life. If you allow your politicians to push through CBDCs and you don't do anything, you're part of the problem, and I should knock you out in the lobby later. The reality is, the world's changing right now for the better or for the worse. Bitcoin is the better, and pure Bitcoin, where you hold the custody. Forget about all these clowns that want to hold your Bitcoin. That's not what Bitcoin's about. It's about self-custody and math. So if these other people want to take your Bitcoin and lose it, be my guest, give it to them. And be regulated, you know? The regulated guys want your Bitcoin. I mean, get down to the reality. And the CBDC, you talk to me, 2 days in jail or something, learning how not to remember what I told you. I'm just telling you, this is worse than privacy. This is training, like you train a dog. Sit, and you give them a bone, they're going to say, hey, you got to do this, or you can't, your money don't work right away. And it's not going to be a human, it's going to be software that determines that your money is not going to work if you don't do what they want. Can you see the disgusting dystopian future that's up ahead? Because I always see the future. I built a computer in 1978 with a soldering iron. I built the Get a Room and No More Hotels in 1995, the first Airbnb. I built Livery Cab in 2005 where people had, that was the first Uber. I built the first live cryptocurrency exchange called 100 people in the New York stock market. And I'm telling you now that the CBDC is going to put you in a prison. You're not going to be able to go 500 feet from your house or 1 mile from your house because you're going to have too big of a carbon credit, a carbon footprint. So listen to me now and wake up. I'm sorry.
Thank you for those remarks. From part of those premises, we could understand that, therefore, if we're saying that if you let the CBDCs or the government to implement CBDCs, would mean that the creation of implementation or the policy or government to apply or create or to obligate people to have CBDCs is not something that will happen 100%, but that the market could do something about it. Therefore, if CBDCs is not for every country an unavoidable destination, therefore maybe it could be combined with Philipp's remarks on the importance of education and training and dialogue with the regulator. Therefore, if there is not an obligation to get to CBDCs, is there hope for central banks from different jurisdictions to have a healthier approach towards crypto?
For me, huh? That was for me?
Or any who would like to go into a healthier approach for central banks?
Listen. They can have a wholesale CBDC, but it's going to leak into us anyway. So that's my one-liner. I don't know what to tell you. It's a political movement. You have to fight the CBDC. If you're a member of a party or something, you have to make sure that the politicians don't want the CBDC. Because, last I heard, we're supposed to be in charge, right? The people are supposed to be in charge, not the central banks. Well, it looks like the central banks are winning, and you guys got to do whatever you can. Take to the streets during campaigns and get involved and stop the CBDC?
Yeah, I think it takes some time that people will go on the street and do demonstrations, right? In Germany, we did that a lot a couple of decades ago, but right now, I don't know. There's too much going on and we don't go to the streets demonstrating. So the best thing is, if you are from Europe, for example, European Union, just write to your politician. So just write them, just let them know, I don't like a CBDC, that they understand that a lot of people, they don't like it, they don't want it, they hate it. So you need to let them know. And then, because politicians, they only think, in Germany, it's 4 years. So one cycle is 4 years, and then they have to get there. In Germany, it's in September next year. They have to get elected again. If they know that a lot of people are against the CBDC and that is a really big issue for them, like in the US, Bitcoiners, now it's a campaign topic from Trump and co, because a lot of the people, they vote because Trump, for example, is pro-Bitcoin, or it seems to be, he's pro-Bitcoin. So if you let them know you don't want to have a CBDC, then they have to decide, what do I want? Do I want to have a job next year for the next 4 years and be elected or not? So I think this is probably one of the best ways. And then people like us at associations, we try to do our best to educate them and to tell them that it's wrong. But in the end, we need more people.
So let me use what you said as a segue, because I think that education is a very important word. And I love to have Nick on the panel because you can't beat passion, right? I think that everyone in this room, everyone in this event is passionate about the elements of this industry. That's the reason why we're here. That's the reason why we work with this. But I do think, working in this industry over the past years, it's hard to speak that language when you're facing regulators or when you're facing the state, right? So those guys don't speak the language of love. They speak the language of pragmatism, right? And I think that the impression I have is that this wave is coming our direction. And again, to use your word, education is important, because I think that the way for us to manifest what we think about this industry, what we think about the ideas they're adjusting, is by actually allowing them to speak the same language that we do, allowing them to understand why we are passionate about this and why we decided to work with this, why we decided to put this forward. I think that, again, when I have the opportunity to talk with regulators, with central bankers, with governments, the impression I have is that, on the one hand, either those guys, they want to surf a wave, is something that's coming their direction, and those guys, they're eager for control. They need to be in control of things, and they can't tolerate the fact that there's a lot of people talking about that, there's a lot of people adopting this, and I have no control whatsoever over it. So there is one straight of people that wants to control. The other one actually gets it, right? And understand that we're talking about potentially a technology that is cheaper, better, faster. It can actually help and impact people's lives in a good way, in a positive way. And I think that, then again, if we don't sit down and try to create a space for dialogue with those people, educating them as to how we see this and how we believe this could be better for the societies, I think that, to me, the future is going to be gloomy. And to your question, when we think about the approach of those guys, to me, the only approach that I can imagine that those guys should have in terms of allowing, this environment of cooperation and, positivity in the future is to be open. I think that whenever we see governments or regulators, because, let's not fool ourselves, right? CBDC is public policy. They're trying to do public policy in some way. When they try to bulldoze the public policy onto us, the result normally is very bad, very negative. So I think that if the approach is to allow room for dialogue, and if we come in a position that, hey, allow me to educate you on what my stance is, perhaps we have a shot. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Now, almost running out of time. Thank you everyone for coming to this panel. We will be able to see with Nick, with Philipp, and with Daniel the perspective from the US, from Europe, and as well from Brazil, and the importance of, beyond of bearing in mind the risks when it comes to control, to privacy, to different uses of CBDCs, we were also able to see the importance that dialogue and education and for standing of your own rights as users that we have, and also different stakeholders. There is a couple of seconds for last remarks in case any of you guys want to give any before we leave.
Yeah, you can vote with your money. I wish David Bailey was here on the stage. He was supposed to be, but he raised $50 million for Donald Trump through us Bitcoiners. And I think that that's the way to get a politician to listen to you. The only way to get a politician to listen to you is give them Bitcoin. If you give them Bitcoin, then they're going to be with you. All the words in the world aren't going to do anything. Also, in the beginning with Dr. Ron Paul, who I brought up earlier, he authored a bill called Audit the Federal Reserve. So what we did was I spearheaded End the Fed movement, and we had about 100,000 volunteers who ran around after their elected officials with a camera and put up on YouTube and Facebook back then and asked them, why don't you want to audit the Federal Reserve? Why don't you want to audit the Federal Reserve? And we ran around with cameras, and it was posted up, and we got it passed in the Congress, but in the House, but in the Senate, this guy screwed us, and we lost by 2 votes. And then they put in one that didn't have any teeth. But the first part of it worked. So the model is vote with your donation, donate Bitcoin, and they're going to love us. Donate Bitcoin, and they're going to love us, and tell them no CBDC, and follow them with cameras and ask them hard questions and post it. And organize. Who's an organizer around here? I don't speak Spanish, but I'll learn Spanish if that's need be. And I'll hit the streets today.
Yeah, I just have one sentence. I think education is key, and study Bitcoin. Especially Bitcoin is much more than, or completely different than cryptocurrencies. And I think we spoke only about Bitcoin and not crypto. So study Bitcoin.
Just for the sake of final words, I just want to, thank the organizers, thank you guys for the amazing panel. I love this kind of panel, which is not, pragmatic, bureaucratic. It's full of passion, so it's good. Again, I think that, to me, always fair in love and war. And I think that, we're going to have space for discussion and space for action ahead of us. We need to choose our weapons and get out there and fight for the cause and reasons that we believe. So,
thank you very much. Everyone, have a great day.